In this video, we are going to talk about the stamps and the stencils for us to continue working with our painting and sculpting, and the uh, the way to create more than what just the program gives you. Because right now, of course, the program comes with a bunch of great stencils for us to work with, but and stamps for us to work with, but we can create our own, and that is always a good thing to do because you want to have your own textures. So in the example that I have here, I got from textures.com this texture of scales, a very nice texture of scales that the original file initially is 1600 pixels by 1063 at 300 dpi, so it's pretty high resolution. And I created a 1024 by 1024 pixels by, I'm sorry, a 2048 by 2048 pixels at 72 dpi, and pretty much adapted this illustration in a manner of putting it all together, and I made a mask for it so that it is not just simply, I'm just going to remove the mask so you can see it, not that, I'm just going to remove, duplicate it for a moment here, and then remove the mask for a moment so that you can see how I duplicated it, use some rubber stamp tool to create it, and then I created a mask for it that allowed me to isolate it as an individual mask. And if you don't know how to do masks, you may have to go and do some Photoshop tutorial. The one that you're doing for your assignment or for your quiz will show you how to create this mask so you can isolate the texture as this is. Then I saved both images, the color one and the gray, and I made a desaturated version of it, in which I just simply took the color version and I said, I'm going to just duplicate it here. I'm going to say duplicate layer. I'm doing it one more time, so I duplicate the layer and I came here and I said image adjustment, desaturate. That way it loses all color information. I still have the color layer, and I have another copy of it already. And I grab this one and just give it a little bit of contrast. Again, over image adjustments, brightness and contrast, I just push the contrast a little bit so that I have a little bit of a more like darks and black and brights that I can use later on. Then I'm going to export both the color version and the grayscale version. So to export the color version, I'm going to just save it as a TIFF. I haven't already saved it, but I'm going to do it one more time. So I'm going to save it as a TIFF, color scales, color TIFF, and I'm going to say save. It's asking me if I can replace. I'm going to say yes. And here there are a few little things that we want to keep in mind. So we want it to be LZW. We want to make sure that it has saves the transparency. That way it comes with this transparency. We want it to be interleaved, so that's the way it works best with the way they're reading the RGB colors. If you're working on the Mac, you of course when I'm working on the Macintosh, or I'm right now working on a PC, so I'm going to be doing it on a PC. So if you're working in the lab, you probably want to do it as a Mac. And here on the layer compression, we want to say discard layers and save a copy. That way I'm creating a flat, not a layer version of it. So I'm going to say OK, and then just save the file. And now I'm going to just show the grayscale, and I'm going to just do exactly the same for the grayscale. So I'm going to save it as I had a grayscale done before. So I'm going to say save, same thing, LZW, transparency, interleaved, PC in my case, and discard layers. I'm going to say OK, and that way I got two files saved there under my folder. And now I'm going to go to Mudbox and I'm going to add those as my, in this case, stamps. I'm going to add the color one to the stamp library. If you look here under your image browser, you should be able to find it. This is the location where Mudbox brings all those files for the stamps or for the stencils. They are here too. Somewhere here are the stencils, so you can save them there. For doing that, you need to have administrator rights to do it, to save them in the library. If you don't have administrator rights, that's okay. you can still come under the stamps. I'm going to go back to my 3D view here, and let's say under the stamps, I'm going to click on the little arrow here. I'm going to add stamp. And since I don't want to get into the administrator right thing here, I just want to go look for my folder. Right now I have it on my own local folder here. I'm going to click on the color version for the stamp, so I can use a color version of it. I'm going to say open it. And then, well, I had already imported it before, so that's why it's asking me if I wanted to use a different name. So let's see if I can see it. Let me just change the name for it, that way I don't have that problem. Give me a second. I just went ahead and went and changed the name of the file because it was giving me a hard time. So there I have them on my separate file folder. I'm going to try it again here. I'm going to load the color version of it. So I'm going to add stamp. This is the color version. I'm going to say open, and then it just got added to my library. So now I'm just simply, and again, you can look at it, and it's a 1024 by 10, I'm sorry, 2048 by 2048. You can do 1024 by 1024, or even 512 by 512. But of course, the lower the resolution, the less detail you have on your texture. So right now I'm gonna go to my paint tools, and I'm just bringing it down here. And my paint tools, I'm going to go and look down for it. So I'm gonna click on it here. I'm going to make sure that on my brush, just make sure, I'm going to just click on the right one. There it is. It was looking for another one that I was using before. So here is, I have my brush, I checked on the use stamp image, and here is the image loaded, and I can start painting now. So right now it's going to paint at 50% strength with this color attached to it. Let's see what it does. I can make it completely white, or I can make it in a lighter yellow tone, and we'll see how it looks. So when I start painting, you can paint the layer group. So the paint. Oh, so I gotta make sure that I'm working the paint. I'm gonna click on the color group. Yep, I had a group. So now I can try to paint here. And here is, you see me painting my texture. So I just clicked once, and it just did that. Of course, it's not doing it properly. I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to test a couple of times. Right now, I'm going to bring the rotation all the way down to 0. And I'm going to try to flip it here to see what it does when it paints there. I'm just holding my mouse for a moment to see if it paints. There it is. It just takes a little bit longer. Maybe it's because it's a large file. And you see that it's flipping it opposite here. So we're going to click twice. And I'm gonna try painting here. I'm holding my mouse. Okay, so it's going the opposite way. Actually, I'm just gonna go one more, and I'm gonna try to paint again. Eventually, it's going to paint. Okay, there is painting again. So it's painting, kind of randomizing it somehow. So there is my painting. My scales probably are not doing it the way I wanted to do. And probably that is because I have to change some of the settings here. Right now it's randomizing it, although the randomizer is not on, but still doing it. So I want to just say, for example, follow a steady stroke. That way, if I come to paint here, it tries to follow the stroke that I am giving to it, which is probably a little bit more of what you want. I can change the distance either to make it more separate or less separate. I have it at 60 right now. I'm going to say 80. I'm just try down here again. So, it's up to you. You like it that way or not. But you can see now, it takes a little while. It's a large file, 2048, but it's giving it good information. I also have additional information here for me to work with, remembering the size, orient to surface, so I can try to see if the orientation to surface works better. And you can play with it a little bit more, fall off in the way it kind of fades off, so I can change that in a different manner. Right now I don't have a big deal with it. So that is what it is doing in my color layer. And again, I right now I'm working on this kind of yellowish tone, but I can change that to see if I can modify it to feel more like a greenish tone. Or you can go a little bit darker if you want to, and that starts just giving you the color that you want to overlay on top of it. I kind of don't like it that way, but there is. So it's giving me a, undo that, just change the color one more time. I kind of like it better on the yellowish tone. Cover it one more time. All right, so that is the color aspect of it using the stamp. And you can use it also as a stencil. And stencil, I have it loaded right there already. Is the black and white version. And with that, I just simply grab it, click on it, and you can see it now that it works. It applies it as a stencil, and it has a different way of thinking of it. So let's say, for example, I'm gonna grab, and you can rotate it too if you want to rotate the stencil or modify it. But right now, I'm gonna try to use the stencil to see if I can paint with it, following the painting. Let me just turn off the stamp because I don't want to use the stamp, so that I can use it as a stencil here and see if I can just paint as a stencil. And you can see now how the stencil is applying, you know, and I can try rotating my stencil based on my needs. So let's say, for example, here I can rotate the thing to say 90 degrees. Probably that's not what I want. I want it to be 270 to have it pointing down. And I continue painting here using the stencil as a way for me to add that color that I have there. So it's interesting. It's a good way of doing it, because if you think of having a background darker tone, you try to organize it and make it, you know, work with it some more. Alright, so that is, just turn off my stencil now, so you can see that I start adding some nice coloring texture into it, which is pretty cool. Now, so I have stamped and stencil, both of them applied, added to my list. Now I can use this, stencils and stamps, as a way for me to sculpt. So I'm gonna go back to the sculpture, but for sculpting, you need to have a little bit more of subdivisions to it. Right now we have 2 levels, which is too little for me to do it. So I'm gonna actually increase the levels. I'm gonna go back up to, say, I'm gonna try level 4. Try level 5. So you need to go very high to use it under the sculpture. I'm gonna create a new layer, because that layer will need to have that level of detail. So I'm jumping from level 2 to level 5 right away. And I'm gonna try to use the sculpt tool, and I'm gonna try to use the bulge tool with a stencil. I'm gonna use my stencil, and now I'm gonna just use the same technique. I'm gonna try to align it with my texture to see if I can have the texture sort of follow the same stencil that I had there before, and then I'll try to just use it to create to bulge out. And I probably did a little too much, and just undo that. So I'm gonna just undo that again, and I'll try to align it one more time with the texture that I had underneath. It's not an easy thing to do, but so I'm just gonna get that there, and I'm going to on my bulge tool, I'm going to bring the strength to point, let's say 0.05. And that way I can try very lightly, just very carefully do it. And if I turn on the stencil, I can start seeing that my object got some little deformation there, because of course you need to have a lot of subdivisions in order to start generating a good texture. And of course this texture is going to be applied later on to be brought as probably a normal map to work in Maya. So that's the way the stencil works with your sculpting. And in the same manner, you can use the stamps where you can, using the sculpt tool, you can choose a, a stamp for you to do sculpting. And of course, that based on the strength that you have here, you can come and start adding some ruggedness, in this case, to the geometry. And I'm just clicking and holding the mouse, not moving it, because if you move it, you kind of like scribble to it, and that doesn't look that good. But if you just click once and hold it for a moment and keep it steady, you start getting it to do a little bit of a bumpiness there. So that's another way of creating a cool sculpture. But notice this is happening in level 5, so it's very high resolution there, but we're gonna later on export it out. But now I'm making a mess of my model because I'm mixing pretty much everything in it. But hopefully that explains and gives you a good reference of working with paint or working with sculpt. All right, I'm just gonna save my file, increment and save again, and I'll see you in the next video.